And we are live.
Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Octavia Tried to Tell Us, Parable for Today's Pandemic.
I'm Monica A. Coleman.
And I'm Tananarive Due.
And
we know why you're here.
We're glad to have you. Holler at us in the chat.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We're going to give a moment, as we always do, for people to get a chance to log in.
I'm going to say my hello in chat. Don't forget, if you are so inclined, you can use the Octavia Tried hashtag, which I'll also put in chat, on social media, such as Twitter, to let other people know about the awesomeness that is this webinar series. I don't say that because of us. I say that because we have such amazing guests, including today.
Great guests. We do.
Just
a really wonderful people who love Octavia and or her work, some who knew her, many who knew her, just sharing with us about their own work, their own ideas. We have been really so blessed to have so many of you all and so many others of our guests be willing to have these conversations with us as we are thinking through and hoping our way into the days in which we're living, you know.
Do you see all the geographical locations that are represented? Alaska, Trinidad and Tobago, and Alaska,
Florida. I saw Atlanta. I saw some California.
Wow.
You're Virginia, from everywhere. Texas. We're glad to have you here.
Atlanta in the house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is exciting.
It really is.
Yes.
All right, I'll give them out maybe 20 seconds. I see people still coming in.
Jamaica. Hey, Figgy Baby's here.
Minnesota, Connecticut, Denver. We're glad to have you.
Everybody.
Athens, Georgia, or Athens, Greece.
What? Zimbabwe. Holy cow.
Oh, St. Lucia, we're glad to have you. Look who Nalo's pulling.
International. Wow.
I know.
Well, that's fantastic. We're so glad that Nalo's appearance has appealed to so many people from so many places. I know I'm a huge fan, and she is blowing up. So, I mean, she's already been blown up, but she's blowing up even more. So this is really exciting and a great time to check in with her.
Let's do our official starts here. Here we are with Octavia Tried to Tell Us number 17, a parable for today's pandemic. Just to give you a sense of how we're going to go, we're going to do the introductions. I have conversation. You can always put Q&A in the chat, but we give you a chance to give questions ahead of time. And so we will often look at those as well as we have our conversation and we talk with Nalo Hopkinson, and then we'll come back and wrap up. So again, if you're on social media, especially on Twitter, but also works very well on Instagram, please use the hashtag Octavia Tried. We get to have wonderful parallel conversations. We always check in on them. And it's good to know what rises to the top for you and what feels important and meaningful for you. And that's how we kind of get to find out. So give us just a moment here. And whoops. 1 second. Here we go. I am delighted to introduce my friend Tananarive Due, an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She is an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary, Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. A leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years, Tananarive Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Award, and a British Fantasy Award, and her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies. Her books include Ghost Summer Stories, My Soul to Keep, and The Good House. She and her late mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stevens Due, co-authored Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. She is married to author Stephen Barnes, with whom she collaborates on screenplays. They live with their son, Jason, and 2 cats.
I always laugh about the cats, but I do. It's true. My friend, the Reverend Dr. Monica A. Coleman, is professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. She's also an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, my grandmother's church, and an initiate of traditional Yoruba religion. She works at the intersection of faith, culture, and social justice. She's the author or editor of 6 books and several articles and book chapters that focus on the role of faith in addressing critical social and philosophical issues. Her book, Making a Way Out of No Way, A Womanist Theology, is required reading at colleges and universities around the country. Her memoir, Bipolar Faith, A Black Woman's Journey with Faith and Depression, received the Silver Illumination Award in 2017. Dr. Coleman speaks widely on religious pluralism, religion and mental health, sexual and domestic violence, and navigating change. She lives in a lively intergenerational household where she's an avid vegan cook and a cyclist. And I'm so excited to be welcoming this week's guest. Born in Kingston, Jamaica, Nalo Hopkinson is an internationally acclaimed science fiction author whose writing highlights themes of Afro-Caribbean culture and Caribbean folklore and addresses issues of race, class, feminism, and sexuality. After several years teaching creative writing at the University of California, Riverside, Hopkinson joins the faculty at the School of Creative Writing at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver this fall. In June 2021, Hopkinson received the prestigious 37th Damon Knight Memorial Grand Master Award, a lifetime achievement award given annually by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. She is the award's youngest recipient, as well as the first woman of African descent and the first Caribbean author to receive this award. So excited about that. Hopkinson lived in Toronto from 1977 to 2011, spending several years as a grants officer with the Toronto Arts Council. Her first novel, Brown Girl in the Rain, is set in a near future Toronto threatened by economic collapse and social upheaval. The work received the Locus Award for Best First Novel. In the same year, Hopkinson received the Astounding Award for Best New Writer, previously known as the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Science Fiction Writer in 1999. She has since garnered so many awards, numerous awards and accolades for 5 additional novels, short stories, and edited collections and anthologies. Welcome, 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 Nalo Hopkinson. So Octavia tried to tell us.
Yeah.
Or as we were corrected, Octavia told us.
Yeah, just because we didn't listen.
Right. But it didn't ring as well when we were putting together the title.
So she told us. I mean, by then we had already, set our marketing. But yeah, Octavia definitely did tell us. And she also tried to tell us that it was really on our end. We weren't listening. But welcome so much to this series. It's so great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you both for having me on. And I know that took a while because our schedules just kept doing this.
Well, you're busy and for all the best reasons.
Yeah.
You're an overnight success after all these years.
Finally at 60. Yeah. And I'm coming to you from a hotel room in Vancouver, BC. So it's all very strange.
Well, it is just a delight to have you.
Thank you.
And as Octavia wrote, the only lasting truth is change.
So
you are undergoing a major change. I guess, one of the things I like to start talking to people about is your pandemic experience. The subtitle for this series is Parable for Today's Pandemic. A lot of people would like to believe it's completely over. I mean, we know that's not the case. But in terms of the worst days, what got you through and what kind of relationship did the pandemic have on your art?
Well, I think I spent the first few months being pissed off because it felt like Octavia wasn't the only person who tried to tell us.
True.
That scientists and those of us who write this type of fiction have been talking about, the dangers of pandemics forever. And it felt like, why were people caught by surprise when we knew this was coming? And then, of course, just the basic fear and terror and, worry that everybody else is going through. In terms of my art, it felt like one of the things that artists do is build community. And so artists all around me, I mean, I'm too tired to do very much of anything half the time, but artists all around me were leaping into action to do stuff to preserve and care for their community. So I was getting asked to write things. So I didn't have so much of a break. In fact, I probably wrote a bit more. And on top of that, I had been struggling to finish a novel for 15 years through illness and homelessness and getting a new job and moving to a new country, getting that novel returned by my publisher for non-completion, which meant I had to find the advance to give them back, all of that. And someone in my community said, well, a group of us have started a daily writing accountability. She's someone I was actually working with as a postdoc fellow of UCR, of the University of California. And she said, we meet Monday to Friday, 8 to 11, and we chat for a little bit or a lot, and then we write or do whatever it is we need to do. I joined them, and that got me through. I finished this novel I've been trying to finish for 15 years, and finally have a publisher's offer for it. So it was a very strange experience, working in this unreal, where things are simultaneously unreal and too real. People are dying, people are suffering, and everything's happening in this weird virtual space where, I forget to go to events I've signed up for because it's just the same day. We're all living in, it's all the same day. So yeah, that's what's been happening. Both good for me and, bad for me.
It was odd, that sense of the world sort of falling apart, burning around us, while there was any glimmer of progress. It's oh, I finished a novel too that I'd been struggling with. So it's kind of yeah, me, but oh no, what a horrible time to be celebrating. It always felt like that,
Well, it's also, it reminds us of kind of, I wouldn't say the upside, but how so many of us needed that, the slow everything down, right? It was hard to just kind of stay at home and not have community and have the kind of anxiety that came along with a global pandemic. But I think for many people, it also kind of let some of those things drop away so that you could focus, right? Or kind of run that last leg of something that you were working on. And that, I think some of us are trying to think, how do we keep that gift of the pandemic, right? How do we, right? How do we not add everything else back in, but still be able to, have some of that solace?
Yeah. Lessons learned from a world pandemic, which is an oxymoron, a pandemic.
Right.
And I guess Tananarive Due would have experienced the same thing too. At the UCs, we had a week over spring break to convert from in-classroom classes to online classes. So it felt like no break at all. I thought my head was going to explode trying to figure out our online learning system for the UCs. And then, of course, having to sort of try to be there for our students as best I could, because they were watching the Black Lives Matter protests. Some of them were participating in it. They were having to deal with all the issues of we're now sheltering in place, sometimes in homes that aren't at all a solace.
Right.
And the sheer guilt coming from them, where I had one student say to me 8 weeks in, well, it's been 8 weeks. I should be used to this online thing by now. I'm like, girl, pandemic.
Yeah.
Right.
We still need to remind ourselves of that, when we find ourselves having emotional blocks or listlessness or any of the things. It's oh, right. We just came out of this horrible experience. It is still ongoing and we don't know the future. So
yeah. So I blame nobody who just kind of shut down creatively, because that's actually a very reasonable response to what was happening all around us, and it's still happening for so many people.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned at the very beginning how, Octavia told us and how so many other scientists and science fiction writers have been telling. And the question we always love to ask here at Octavia Tried is, tell us your Octavia story. Did you know her? Which books did you read? What moved or inspired you about, our Octavia Butler and her work?
It's a longish story that gets to Octavia. So I was living in Toronto, Canada, and working in the North York Public Library that became the Toronto Public Library, as a clerk and then a clerk supervisor, which meant that if I wasn't finding the books in the library, I could go and tap one of the librarians on the shoulder and say, "Could you order this for us?" And that meant I got to read Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand by Samuel R. Delany for the first time in a hardcover, because usually at that point science fiction was coming out in trade in paperback originals. You didn't get so many hardcovers. And I had known Chip's work, known Delany's work, and loved it. Got the copy of the book, ordered through the library, and it being a hardcover, it had a dust jacket that had a picture of him, which was the first time I realized that he was a Black man. And that got me thinking, wait a minute, my universe has just doubled in size because now there's two people I know who are Black who are reading science fiction. One of them writing it. Where are the others? So the blessing of working at a library meant I could go look. And I found your work, Tananarive, I found Steve's, I found Charles Saunders, who's from Nova Scotia, and I found Octavia. And I ordered all of Octavia's that had been published to date through Interlibrary Loan, and I read it in like a 3-month period. And she's fierce, so I got really sad at first.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Despairing for the world. But a few years later, I had the experience of being in Barcelona, alone, no money, not speaking the language. And what I had was a copy of one of Octavia's novels, one of the parable novels? No, the ones before that. And it was like coming home to an old friend. It was so comforting to reread. I got to know her through my publisher because for a while we had the same publisher. And when my first novel was to be published, my editor, Betsy Mitchell, who was also Octavia's editor, approached her and said, "Would you blurb this novel?" Which she did. And I wrote her a letter of thanks, which is now in the Eaton Library at, no, it's not in Eaton, it's in the Huntington, yes. We have a copy in the Eaton. And later met her when I was on tour. And I remember her saying, I'm giving this reading and just so glad to see everybody, and particularly glad to see Octavia. And I must have run by and hugged her a bunch of times. And finally she said, "You hug a lot, don't you?" Okay, I've overdone it. But I have memories of times like being at the Utopialis convention in Nantes, France, where we were both guests, and just being on panels together and just walking around the grounds and talking together and getting to know each other better. That are just quite lovely. When I got the news that she had passed, it was such a shock because you always expect, your guiding lights are going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And I remember calling my editor, a different editor, but same publishing house and also Octavia's editor. And I'm in Toronto, Jamie's in New York, and we bawled at each other on the phone for 3 hours. Just the shock of this loss.
Still reverberating, all these years later. Although I do think Octavia would be so gratified to see not just how her work has been lifted up, like Parable of the Sower was on the New York Times bestseller list in 2020 because it spoke so much to our experience. And she never got to see that. She never got, I don't think she ever had a New York Times bestseller in her lifetime. But beyond that, just the whole scope of Afrofuturism has grown so much and has such a prominent place now in a way I think would have made her very happy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's still our guiding star in so many ways.
So many ways.
You know, Nalo, you've had so many difficult experiences, you know, that some of us can hardly imagine, i.e. the homelessness, you know, and I'm wondering if there were, like in my case, reading Parable of the Sower, I felt like that book made me stronger as I went because I had to get sort of a tougher skin to read more than 3 pages at a time because it was such a grim world. I'm wondering if there were any specific lessons or even general lessons you drew from her heroines, or maybe in part some of your own heroines, when you've faced difficult times yourself and you didn't know what the future would bring. I know that's a tough question to answer.
It is a tough question because I don't know. I never thought of learning from my own heroines because I think they're kind of learning from me. But I'm not a religious person, especially. I am a person who's interested in having a strong moral code and interested in the way that belief reaches not just for community, but for that numinous, that thing that we can't exactly explain. And I remember starting Parable of the Sower and being kind of avoidant because start with that word parable that connects me to some of the things about Christianity that were not great for me growing up, and reading it and thinking, holy God, yeah, God is change. That makes so much sense. Like it just made so much sense that this beautiful chaos that you cannot control, but that in a way you shape, made a lot of sense to me. And I'm grateful to her for having that hard-nosed look at the spiritual.
Yes. And so interesting that she was also coming from a place where she had fallen away from traditional religion and yet created a character who was basically creating a religion as a means to bring us forward, and to give us that little bit of utopianism that's hidden inside of Parable.
I mean, this is like, this is why part of me, as a religion professor and a religious leader, I love Parable is for her portrayal, right, of this belief system. And I really want to ask you, as someone who loves Brown Girl in the Rain, for so many reasons, and loves the way you talk about, kind of a pan-Caribbean religion, right, that is distinctly Africana, for lack of a better term there. And I would love it if you would talk about how what it means to you to bring in your culture to Afrofuturism and Caribbean and Canadian culture to Afrofuturism, and why that still included ancestors and gods.
Yeah, that was my project from the beginning, coming into it as a writer, because I've been reading science fiction fantasy all my life. And at that point, reading about, people who look nothing like me and gods that I studied in, school that were from countries over there. Growing up in the Caribbean, there's more knowledge now that how much of our belief systems come from Yoruba, but there wasn't as much knowledge of it then. So my parents characterized it as the word just came and went. Charismatic Christianity.
Yes.
It wasn't until I was beginning to work on Brown Girl on the Ring that I discovered there's a whole nother religion. And what's more, it's African, it's West African. The gods and goddesses and deities look like you. They feel like you. You understand their quarrels, their aesthetics, and so I became very, very interested in this belief system that felt like it was that it came from roots that I shared, and so did a bunch of research, and sort of fell in love with the fact that they are real people. They squabble, they quarrel, they having relationships with each other that they really shouldn't be having. But they also have this deep bond of care towards humans that is not easy. Like a deity like Baron Samedi or Legba will hold you to account. And as well as being a caretaker of both young children and old people, he's also very, very sexual. Mm-hmm. And it was such a relief. Mm-hmm. I mean, to have a religion that allowed for that fullness of what humanity is.
Yeah.
So I've ended up talking about it a lot in a lot of my work since. And finally, with Ezeli, ended up being able to write about her when I did the DC comic House of Whispers in the Sandman universe, because Neil Gaiman had conceived of a house in that universe that was run by Ezeli, and I got the chance to write it. So I got to explore Ezeli even more and to sort of. One of the things that Octavia said that I so deeply agree with is that we make our gods, they make us, we make them. Mm-hmm. And so I got to sort of put my spin on Ezeli, the way that I see her. And that was lovely. That was a gift. I got to do that for 2 years.
That's so beautiful. And that's a great segue to this sort of idea of how Afrofuturism, marginalized creators are having opportunities, frankly, like never before. And I know it's affected you. It certainly has affected me, that there would be a convergence of sort of mainstream comics and this thing that is so deeply personal and important to you. What has it been like meeting these times? What does it feel like? And do you trust it? Do you think it will last?
That's the question.
It's like, how long is the portal open?
Right.
Been around the world a while. I've seen the term Afrofuturism come and go, maybe 3 times now. So how long is it going to last? It's a beautiful time and a time that I don't know if I can trust yet. Mm-hmm. When I was watching a YouTube channel by a man who reviews movies. And when I realized I was listening to a young white man, the term Afrofuturism was coined by a white man, but Derry's been around a while and has done his research. But this is a young white man using the term Afrofuturism more or less correctly, on YouTube. I was like, whoa, something has changed. And so that having publishers sometimes go a little bit more past just showing willing, but doing the work. Mm-hmm. Having somebody like Neil, who had conceived of the House of Whispers a while ago, essentially say that to us, there were 4 new writers of 4 new Sandman comics. I created these toys, go and play with them. People have asked me whether it was assumed that Neil sort of penned the basic story of each comic and then I wrote it. No, that's not how it happened. Me and Dan Watchers, with whom I was co-writing for a while, we wrote the story. So to have that opening up is both, when Massa says come into the house, they're like, all right, I can come into the house.
Massa says come into the house.
But I'm watching my back.
Right. Like I'm edging in slowly.
We're like, okay, nice furniture.
Making sure you see, and
I'm not
none of my hands are on this. Exactly. So, and I'm also seeing, more Black editors, Black publishers, embracing the speculative fiction that you and I, Tananarive, have been working in forever. So I don't as much anymore have to split myself in two.
Yeah. Right.
It's
we can be authentic within these larger spaces, but also with one eye on that door that some folks cannot wait to shut behind us, with that whole, what I find to be such an infuriating idea going through publishing and Hollywood right now, that a white creator can't get a break. I'm just going to leave that alone right now.
Right. We'll be like, read the room.
Yes, they don't know what a break looks like. You're soaking in it right now.
Like, one thing I like about your work, Nalo, is that you don't only bring what matters to you in your culture, but the culture becomes a source of power for your characters. And, and I'm always about, how Black girl women save the day, right? And so I would love it if you would talk a little bit about how not only did you say, I want to see my experience, but it's actually my cultural experience that is the power of the Afrofuturist work you're doing in the novel, and maybe even for Afrofuturism as a field.
Yeah. We're everywhere. Right? Black people are everywhere. The diasporas at this point are big. Our cultures are rich and millennia old. Drawing on that is definitely a source of power. And in terms of Black women saving the day, there's a collection of poetry, I believe, by Jamaican Canadian poet Lillian Allen, and the title is "Women Do This Every Day." I'm like, yeah. We do. We do this every day. Acknowledging that is what we do is so important to me. And also not making it sort of nice and comfortable. Our lives are not, for the most part, nice and comfortable. Right. So taking the courage to put in some of the hardship, or also the fact that we can be intersectional. We can be Black and queer and science fiction readers and, teachers, and we can be all of it all at once, or we can be parts of it. We don't have to sort of make ourselves fit that very Huxtable shape, right? To be who we are.
Yes.
And that's very, very, very important to me. I realized early on that as a writer, I was getting associated with the voice of Black working class. I like to think that I am in allyship and solidarity, but I'm not working class. I grew up poor middle class. I mean, poor, but middle class. And so have some of those habits of assuming entitlement. That I figure if I can convey those, if I can teach those to my students, I'm doing part of my job. Because a place like UCR is 77% people of color, and a lot of people who are immigrants. A lot of the undergrads come to us without any sense that they have a place. But I also want to not sort of take up room that I don't actually own. So now I'm looking at how do I write this middle-class Black Caribbean experience in science fiction and fantasy in ways that feel right to me. And I look to work like Tananarive and Steve's for some of that. Girl, you terrify the hell out of me. Your fiction, I gotta be sitting with my back up against a wall to read.
Totally.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The Good House.
Nightmare in my brain, yes.
I'm never stepping into a lake again. Those things are always weird to a Caribbean girl anyway. Like, where are the waves? Why is it not salty? And, you know, it's because there are ghosts in there.
Exactly. Well, I love that notion of finding sort of personal authenticity within the voice. Not, I mean, sometimes inevitably we do write about experiences that aren't specifically our own, but yeah, making it more central to your experience. I think that's a beautiful notion. And it's kind of an awkward segue, really not much of a segue at all, into a question we have from one of our viewers who is in Puerto Rico as a retiree. Do you see a future of spaceports in the islands? And there's a lot to this question. I should have phrased it. So, and she's talking about Yamaya as the jealous goddess and the hurricanes coming. And in any case, I'm just wondering if you are either working on or see opportunities or have seen other writers who are mining Caribbean history and folklore in their work toward sort of presenting a future.
So many more. And if she's not read the Tobias Buckell short story, Toy Planes, I would recommend it. Tobias is a Caribbean science fiction fantasy author, and he has a short story that was first published in Nature Journal that's about the first Caribbean people to go to space. Yeah, and nice. the last line always brings tears to my eyes. And we have writers such as Karen Lord and Arce Garcia and Carol Turnbull, so many more. And we're all looking at Caribbean history, Caribbean folkways, Caribbean language, Caribbean innovation. And we're writing this stuff in a world that still thinks that mostly what we're good for is sunshine and blunts. And we're good for that. let me not. But the sheer innovation of the Caribbean region, I think, gets silenced. I mean, even just look at our writing. We can make a sentence dance for its supper. Caribbean writing in the world literary traditions are so rich. Caribbean writing in specific, just damn. So yes, it is happening. Spaceports. Read Toby's story. I'm not sure what I think about it yet. I mean, I know I love Toby's story.
The question,
yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. Who owns the infrastructure? Where's the mining for the technology coming from? On whose bodies is it being made? All of that. Maybe spaceports somewhere else, like off planet. But somehow it comes back for me to samizdat, to owning the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That don't mean we won't be just as exploitative as massa. Hopefully it won't, but we're humans. And yet, I think it needs to come from us. We need to have some ownership.
Yes. Did you want to pick a question?
I'm
Monica?
looking at I'm like, well, I guess I'm thinking this is not from one of the questions from the audience, but very much connected to what you're saying about the ideas about the future coming from us, right? So I guess I'm curious, we've really talked a lot about how Afrofuturism is giving us hope, right? And giving us a kind of vision of, hope. Sometimes it's a very mitigated hope, right? Sometimes there's dystopia mixed in, or oftentimes, but it's also, right, hopeful. That's what makes it Afrofuturism as compared to something else. And I'd like to know, what is your hope, for not just for Afrofuturism, but also in your own work for how are you using Afrofuturism to kind of show your hope or your hopes for the future?
For me, a lot of it is about designing community and social spaces. many times I'm drawing on older traditions of ways we be or used to be. So, and I'm not always talking about the future. A lot of my writing is technically fantasy, so it's set in the past. The book I just finished, I created a Caribbean nation that was formed on marronage. So it's people who were enslaved running away and forming their own community. And not all of them are Black. I mean, slavery and indentured labor happened to a bunch of us.
Right.
So it's Black, Taino, and poor whites who've run away from indentured labor and formed their own community 300-400 years ago. And I got to design that community, and I was able to look at history for examples of where things heading in that direction had happened. So Palmares in Brazil, that was a free community for 200 years before the Portuguese came and took it back. Back implies that they'd never really owned it in the first place, but they thought they did.
Right.
I was able to look at our traditions of community gardening, for instance, and that could sound very twee, but I was reading books on African agriculture and the system of community gardening that meant that it was difficult to lay siege a community because they had their own food. And they were growing it right there. And when in your backyard you have a trout pond, plus all the produce growing around it, it's harder to starve you out. So all of that I was able to bring in, and also to mess with the social order a little bit. And a lot of what I'm looking at is, how do we remake our social systems? Even if I'm looking at the past, it's like, how do we remake our social systems so that there's room? It acknowledges the full range of being. My main character is, queer as a $3 bill. And that is not unusual or thought of as particularly remarkable in his community. I have different systems of marriage and different ways of marriages forming. I have, children given more agency, where children are able to speak up in community deliberations and have their voices heard. It's just, there's a way in which it feels, I don't know that the term utopian fits, but it feels like a healing thing to do, for me at least personally. And I can't wait to see how people respond to it.
Yeah, I love the idea of sort of tearing down the barriers to imagination, because so many of the social issues we have right now are rooted in, well, that's just the way we do it. That's the way it's been. That's the way it's done. And there's this terror sometimes of even thinking about a new way, a new path. And I think that's why the arts are so important, because they show us the new way in action, right?
Yeah.
It
I have a lot of that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, no, you're helping us imagine a new world.
Yeah, dragging myself along with it, because you have to be constantly self-questioning when you do that. What did I leave out? Where are my own biases coming in? And you're never going to catch them all. You just never are. You're never going to make a perfect work. And I think the beauty of art is that it is imperfect. That it's still striving for something outside of the norm, but isn't perfect. And I have so many of my students, particularly students of color, students otherwise marginalized, ask about how do you represent your culture in science fiction and fantasy? Like the idea of doing so is so, they have a hard time reaching for it. And that again is where I can thank so many places, but starting with Caribbean artistic tradition and Caribbean linguistic revolutions that say our language is vital and full and has its own grammar and works. And so the way we speak is embedded in our world building, right?
Yes. I love all of that. And I can't wait to see what you do next. So excited for you and all your changes.
Yeah, I'm intimidated, but I'm going for it.
You're gonna have a lovely time.
I mean, that's part of what makes us connect with something, right? Because if it begins to, it lets some of us who are outside of a world enter into a new world. But there's also something about a familiarity for people too, right? That your work will feel or sound or it tastes like you and your people, right? Yeah. Which some folk have had for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things about, we talk about Black Panther and there's lots to critique and lots to love. I think I saw it 4 times. I started calling it going to Black Panther church.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And it was, I saw grown men burst into tears at that first scene where the plane breaks through into Wakanda. I saw grown Black men burst into tears and then know exactly what they were feeling. But that it's also so familiar. Like I was recognizing patterns in the fabric that I had studied and learned about. I was hearing different voices from different parts of Africa, and I'm pretty sure I heard a Jamaican voice at one point. That one of the queens is the older Jamaican actor, and so that combination of both that celebratory, we can do this. Look, it's not completely unfamiliar, and also critique, because that movie does critique this very technocratic world that is trying to shut out the rest of Africa, the rest of Blackness across the diaspora to sort of keep itself pure. Right. I love that it critiques itself. So it's very, very important to do all of that, to be able to dissent as well as to celebrate.
Yes. And I have to give kudos to Ryan Coogler for giving us that gift. And really, in terms of Hollywood anyway, really knocking those doors open to give so many of us who've been shut out, like just viciously shut out for so long. And attempts to erase us, frankly. Honestly, whether they're unconscious attempts or not, we had been erased in a lot of science fiction, cinematic science fiction and fantasy. So this is just a beautiful time. Like, it's like Queen Ramonda said, this is your time.
This is your time.
This is our time. And it is a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah. And as somebody who makes things and who sews and who's, a femme and very interested in fashion and design, seeing what Ruth Carter did.
Yes.
Whew.
Absolutely.
Man. Oh, man. She deserves all the awards. Yeah.
Yes, she does.
Well, it's a wonderful segue to talk about not just your writing, but your other forms of art. I want to share where people can find more about you and get their, learn more about the arts, the various arts you create, and have some access to that. Will you talk a bit about your site?
So you can find some of it on my website. I have decorated the website with some images of some of the sort of sculptures I've created. I'm interested in the domestic arts because that was a lot of my entry into art. Was my mother learning to cook, learning to sew, learning to crochet, to tat, to knit, and back then it was a way of saving money. Nowadays, many of those things are hobbies and actually cost you more than just going to Elaine Bryant and buying a dress. So it's only recently that I've begun to talk about what I do as also being art, because for me it was so tied into this is just what I do. But a lot of my sculpture starts from a soft-bodied shape that you stuff and sand and paint until it gets semi-rigid. It feels very light and feels a bit like thin leather. A lot of my images are bringing in my aesthetics and my interests. So about hella black mermaids, right? And I tend to make them tick because I sort of feel that a skinny mermaid is a cold mermaid. But I'm also looking at my connection to Yoruba and to Blackness that way, in having the riverine deities, the Oshun and Yemaya, represented that way. But I also, I've done, people ask me what medium I work in, and I work in whatever I can turn my hand to. And many of them, because they start from craft, there's access to learning them. So I've done collage, have I done painting? Well, I've used paint.
Hey, that's painting. If you used paint, technically it is painting.
It is painting. I mean, you can tie a paintbrush to an elephant's tail and it will make something. It seems to be enjoying itself doing so. So yeah, I guess I painted. But it's only recently that I'm starting to think about it as art. And I had a first piece in a group show early this year, at JMU. And I've had a collage of mine used as an illustration for a cover of a colleague's book. And I'm going to try and be pushing that side. I also design fabric for some values of design. There is a website called spoonflower.com. It's a mom and pop print fabric and wallpaper on demand business that they have created a community around. And so you can find my designs on spoonflower.com, where you can buy them printed on fabric or wallpaper. And that I've been doing for quite a few years. I had no training in design, just a deep need to see some of the Afrocentric images out there. And so I started playing around with it, and I'm still learning as I go. I know Photoshop is my enemy, but I'm learning.
Well, you are creative in so many, many ways. That's just more for us to enjoy.
Basically.
And cooking, cooking is art you can eat. So there is no downside.
No, not at all.
In a shorter time frame than like a novel.
Right? Yeah, exactly. 20 minutes, you can have a meal on the table. It's pretty and you can eat it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your gift and bringing your creativity to us here at Octavia Tried to Tell Us.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you for including me.
Oh, absolutely. We would not have dreamed of not including you. So I'm just glad you were able to come and find the time. And best of luck to you with everything that you're doing and your changes and your lucky students up in Vancouver.
We'll be looking for the new work.
Yes,
you and me both.
Well, thank you, Nalo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
What a rich conversation we got to have.
Super. Yes.
I still can't believe we've been doing this. Is our 17th one.
17.
And, now we just want to take a chance to share with you, since we've been doing this so much longer than we thought we would. But we do it because we enjoy it. And we get to have these great conversations with not just our guests again, but with you. And that gives us a lot of life. But there are times when we wanted to have a more intimate conversation. So Tananarive is going to share a little bit about that too.
Yeah, we had been doing these Octavia Tried to Tell Us webinars for a little while. And we have a lot of engagement in chat, but people weren't able to really see each other face to face. And Monica and I also felt that people sort of needed more interaction than the webinar Q&A format, where they could share what they're going through, their pandemic experiences, their coping experiences, their inspirations. So we created what's called the Shaping Change community, which meets typically the week after Octavia Tried to Tell Us. So our next one is next Saturday. And in that community where you get to be on camera too, if you want to, where you can talk to each other in addition to hearing us talk, you will learn the 7 steps of Octavia's method of shaping change, ongoing discussion of her work and influence. We have a Shaping Change e-journal with monthly writing prompts, interaction with us, of course, which you can do in chat here, but much more so in our community. And also as a sign-up bonus, we send you right away a recording that my husband, Stephen Barnes, and I did with Octavia back in the year 2000. They were very close friends. So it's a very intimate sort of conversation with her. And that's something that we share with you.
So
yeah,
we have these awesome community members. So there we go. I wanted to share a bit with you from what Erica has to say about being a part of the community. And she says, from kindred to wild seed in her penultimate parable of the Sower duology, Octavia Butler demonstrated a philosophy of gathering community. When we gather virtually for shaping change, we are honoring and practicing what Butler gifted to us, building our singular voices and talents and sparking the talents of one another as we witness, bear, and activate change.
I am glad she feels that way. That's how I feel too. I learned so much also from the community members, and they're the wide variety of people, artists and retirees and rappers, Vicky Baby, who I think is still here.
And we have another great short testimony from Amanda, who will share that we gather and we don't have to prep for it, just need to show up. So here we go. He'll share a little bit as well here.
I have a few different online communities, like a reading group, and then there, a few different things. And this is the one where I just feel good. It's just, there isn't like, it doesn't make me feel like, oh, I have to do this, this, and this in preparation for this meeting. Those are things I want to do for those meetings, but it all piles up and gets burdensome. And here it's just about feeling and processing. And I find that, it's not the brain work. So it's different kind of work, but it's one that can kind of lean into in a very comfortable way that, like I'm talking about, that it serves you, I don't know, bodily, spiritually, etc.
So nice.
It really is. I feel so moved. I really do.
I know that is really nice. She said it's like part like talk show, part like support group. It's kind of hard to describe it. But if you want to know more about it, check out our website at www.octaviawebinar.com. It's not, you're not buying it or joining it. It's a small monthly fee, but you can just see more about it if you go to the website at www.octaviawebinar.com. And then if you do want to join, you have plenty of time before next Saturday's meeting, which would be your first to join our group.
We'd love to have you in our community.
We absolutely would. And there are a lot of you still here. I see the chat is lively, so I kind of feel bad breaking up y'all's party, but all good things do come to an end. So we've come to the end of our webinar today, but thank you so much for coming. Thank you again to Nalo Hopkinson for sharing so much of your wisdom and experiences and outlook with us. I feel very enriched by it, and I hope you all do too.
Thank you again, and we'll see you next month.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.